I'm Ron. Thanks for checking this out. When I was a lowly grad student, one of my composer colleagues came into the office one morning. He was very excited. On his walk in, he had gone by a factory, and he had heard some really cool rhythms coming out of that factory, and he had decided that he was going to try to make a piece of music out of it. This is typical of my experience with musicians and other creative people. We tend to have our antenna up all the time, and we're always looking for that next creative idea that can be a springboard for some project we're working on. So here's a disclaimer. I am a musician. I am not a cultural historian. So if anything I'm about to say ruffles your feathers, try to remember that. Last time I mentioned that I'm working on transcribing all 35 songs from my Morning Star, Evening Star project and putting them into a couple of songbooks. I hope to have the first one ready by midsummer sometime, so I'll keep you posted as that goes along. Today we're going to look at a playing technique that I used in several of those songs, but first I thought it might be interesting, and I hope at least a little bit enjoyable, to look at some of the background of how that particular project came to be what it is. My first two CDs were both pretty contemporary style, had full band tracks and a heavy influence from rock and blues and even ska. I decided I wanted my next project to really focus in on the flutes themselves and have them be accompanied just by drums and shakers and dance bells. I also wanted to explore some more traditional kinds of song structures. I was looking around a long time for a way to kind of organize this project on a larger scale, and I wasn't having much success. Then I stumbled on a book by a writer from Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma, and the writer said that the book was about the sacred calendar of the Cherokees. Well, I was intrigued. Now, when I actually started looking at the book, it became pretty clear that it was really an interpretation of the Maya Tzolk'in calendar. I'll tell you more about that calendar in a while. It had a number of uses, but as I understand it, one of the uses was to help predict the position of Venus in the sky. Venus is very, very important in Maya traditions and for the Maya astronomers. So I decided to organize this big project around the Tzolk'in calendar, kind of as interpreted by a modern-day Cherokee Nation, Oklahoma writer. Dominant culture narratives rarely talk about how extensive our trade routes were and how much cultural exchange was happening here long before the Europeans ever arrived. Now, I'm an enrolled citizen of the Chota Cherokee tribe of Alabama. We are a state-recognized tribe. Our lands and offices are in northern Alabama. We are covered under some federal law like the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act and the American Indian Trades and Acts Craft, but that's not really relevant for what we're talking about here. Like a lot of our indigenous folks in what's now called the Southeast United States, the Cherokee people were a mound-building and corn-growing culture. This cultural complex of building mounds and corn and even a lot of the stories that come along with that and certainly worldview seem to have originated in Mesoamerica and come to a great cultural flowering among the Maya peoples. In fact, over the years, I've come to think of the complex of the peoples of the Maya as kind of a foundational culture for some of us who are indigenous in this hemisphere, not unlike how Greek culture is considered foundational by a lot of Europeans, for example. So for me, a modern-day Cherokee musician being inspired and guided by a Maya calendar is not unlike writers like Natalie Haynes, Stephen Fry, Madeline Miller, and a lot of others who reinterpret Greek myths. Again, if that's a problem for you, try to remember that I am a musician, not a cultural historian. Also try to remember that for millennia, the Rio Grande was just a river, not an international boundary, and people and ideas flowed across that river pretty freely. Actually, they still do, even though it's become a bit more complicated. Okay, back to the calendar. The Tzolk'in calendar is two concurrent cycles of days. There is a 13-day cycle of numbered days and a 20-day cycle of named days. And those cycles reset to one together every 260 days. because 13 times 20 is 260. Now, there are many uses that were made for this calendar. Some people have noticed that 260 days is approximately 9 lunar months and is also pretty close to the human gestation period. Venus was very important to Maya astronomers, so some people have said that it helps to predict the position of Venus in the sky, and it can be used to time ceremonies, crop plantings, all kinds of things. It's really a very important calendar. Now, the CNO writer who was interpreting this for modern times really just retained everything about the calendar and provided symbols that would resonate for modern-day Cherokee. I have also kept the 2 cycles of days and made one song for each of the days. So on this first CD of Morning Star, Evening Star, there are 13 tracks, one song for each of the numbered days. And then on CD 2, there are 20 tracks, one for each of the named days, plus a greeting song and a farewell song. So actually 22 tracks altogether on that disc. That's why there are 35 songs on this project. Now, you can hear the entire project right here on YouTube Music. I've also made some little art videos of some of the tracks, and I'll make links in the description box for that. And of course, you can purchase and download the tracks at places like Apple Music and platforms like that, and that's always greatly appreciated, of course. If you want more information about the Maya calendar systems, the National Museum of the American Indian has a wonderful web page, actually a series of pages that will give you a real deep dive into that. One of my favorite features there is a page where you can put in the Western calendar date, and it will translate it into the dates on a number of different Maya calendars. Here's a screenshot. I put in the post date for this video, February 21st, 2025, and highlighted in the bottom right-hand corner here is the Tzolk'in date on the Maya calendar. Okay, now there are some other places where you can find out about indigenous astronomy in general, and a really, really great place to start, I think, is this book, Native Science by Gregory Kahete. There's an entire chapter on indigenous astronomy, and Maya's included, but not just the Maya peoples. One of the great creation epics of the Mayan people is the Popol Vuh, and this is a recent translation by Michael Bassett. I think it does for the Popol Vuh kind of what Seamus Heaney's does for Beowulf. Kind of takes a great foundational text and puts it in a beautiful poetic form that works really well for modern English readers. This book is published by Milkweed. Now, Milkweed does a great job publishing indigenous writers. They did Robin Wall Kimmerer's already classic Braiding Sweetgrass, and they also do fiction like Deborah Wilson's The Seed Keeper, and they republished Deborah Erling's Perma Red. So they're a publisher to keep an eye on if you're interested in indigenous literature, and I'll post a link to their website in the description box. If you're interested in folks from other cultural groups working with ancient calendar systems, I would recommend you check out right here on YouTube the channel Nordic Animism. The host, Rune Jarno Rasmussen, is very, very engaging and incredibly knowledgeable about ancient Northern European animist ways of thinking. And he has a very interesting book, too, called The Nordic Animist Year. So lots of places you can go to do lots of deep dives on this particular topic, if you wish. Okay, let's do some playing. One of the tracks on the Morning Star, Evening Star project is called Woodcock's Flight. The song is kind of a metaphor for the mating flights that woodcocks do in the springtime. They'll go up in the air and do fancy patterns trying to attract the eye of a potential mate. Then they'll give a little call and flutter down to the ground. So for the ending of this song, I wanted a sense of active texture and active energy to kind of portray woodcock fluttering down to the ground. Now, if we were silver flute players, we'd have a range of 3 octaves, and we could just do some fancy run over 2 octaves or more. We don't have that option. So here's what I came up with, and I'll kind of take you through it step by step so that you can try it out too. What we're going to start with is simply walking down basic scale. Now, I have Sarah here with me today, and I've asked her to kind of zoom in on my fingers because a lot of you have said you want to see more of what my fingers are actually doing to do these things. So many thanks to Sarah for helping out. All right, so we're going to start with just a simple basic scale from top to bottom. All right. Now, I'm just going to take my top finger on my top hand and make it go up and down quickly while I do the same thing again. Now, I'm sure you can hear that makes some pretty funky intervals that are well outside the 12-tone equal temperament system, but that's one of the things I really, really like about it. Now, if you want to extend that gesture a little bit, you can do that just by coming back up maybe a little bit along the way. You know, we're just going straight down. You know, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but it's also the most predictable way to get there, so we're going to try changing it up a little bit along the way. If you want to get really fancy, you can even use 2 fingers occasionally on the way, and you'll get a whole different set of extra intervals along the way. And when we get to the bottom, I'm going to switch off and just do a simple tremolo down at the bottom and maybe even throw in a couple of barks along the way. All right, so that's a lot to try all at once. So that's why I'm showing you kind of step by step, and you can take it at your own speed. So if I were going to kind of mix those all together in some way, this is what the end of Woodcock's Flight might sound like for today anyway. So when you feel like your song needs a little bit of extra activity and energy, you can experiment with that. And really, we're just riffing off of simple basic scale patterns. We're just adding some other layers of activity to it. Well, that's about it for today. If you found this helpful and enjoyable, please give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have comments and feedback, I always love to hear it. And certainly if you have something to share about today's topic, further resources, that would be excellent as well. All right, I'll see you again towards the beginning of the next lunar cycle.